Vivian Carter had performed for presidents. She had walked every red carpet on the planet. She had sat across from kings and never once lost her composure. Nothing, absolutely nothing surprised her anymore. Until a 7-year-old boy knocked on the window of her Bentley, looked her dead in the eye through the glass and said, "Ma'am, you look expensive." "That's good. Welcome to Black Silk Stories, the home of Afro-Korean stories that hit different. Subscribe, drop a comment, and do not go anywhere. This is only the beginning." The morning had started wrong. Mirabelle had not slept. Not really. She had folded herself into the chair by her design table at some point past 2 in the morning, surrounded by fabric swatches, her sketchbook open to a page she had drawn and redrawn 4 times. Her neck ached. Her eyes were dry. And the email on her laptop screen, the one she had read 17 times since midnight, had not changed its answer. "Dear Miss Mirabelle," it read, "we regret to inform you that Ms. Donaldson will be unable to commit to any external appearances within the next 30 days. We wish you the best in your endeavors." She closed the laptop. She did not cry. She had already done that yesterday, and the day before. There was nothing left inside her chest except a hollow, quiet kind of ache that did not make any sound. 9 days. She had 9 days left before the final phase of the Lumiere Global Fashion Competition. The most prestigious fashion competition in the world. The kind of competition that did not come twice. The kind that took careers from promising to legendary overnight. Mirabelle had fought through Phase 1 against 214 contestants. She had survived Phase 2 when only 30 remained. Now she was one of the final 10. 10 designers from across the world, each given one task. Get 5 celebrities to wear your designs to the Lumiere Gala night. 5 celebrities. 1 night. 1 stage. The world watching. Simple, they had said. Simple, if your name already lived in the mouths of the powerful. Simple, if your phone held numbers that most people never got to dial. But Mirabelle was 25 years old and self-built. She had a Harvard degree and hands that could make fabric breathe. What she did not have was connections. What she did not have was a single celebrity who had said yes. Not one. In 9 days she needed 5. She stood up from the chair and walked to the window. The Dojan estate was quiet at this hour. The compound was large and perfectly kept, wide green lawns, a fountain at the center that Arya liked to throw coins into, a long driveway lined with lights that glowed amber in the early morning. Mirabelle had lived here for 3 years now, since her parents died 14 months apart from each other, and her auntie Renee had shown up at her door and simply said, "You are not staying alone. Pack your things." She pressed her forehead against the cool glass and closed her eyes. Mirabelle. Her mother's voice lived somewhere in the back of her memory, warm and certain. "Baby, you are going to be the best in the world. Say it. I'm going to be the best in the world. Like you mean it. I'm going to be the best in the world." She opened her eyes. The fountain was still running. Down the hallway, behind a door decorated with crayon drawings of superheroes, and one very ambitious portrait of Juan Dojan that had given him 6 fingers on his left hand, Arya and Zion were already awake. This was not unusual. The twins operated on a schedule that no adult in the Dojan household had ever been able to explain. They were simply awake before the world was ready for them, already full of energy and intention, like 2 small engines that had been running all night. Arya was sitting cross-legged on her bed in a white and gold hanbok-inspired sleep set, tiny gold butterflies embroidered along the collar, her hair in 2 big puffs that she had somehow managed to redo herself, which meant one puff was slightly higher than the other. She was holding a crayon. Zion was on the floor in matching deep navy pajamas with little Korean characters along the hem that translated, if anyone had bothered to check, to small but mighty. He was lying on his stomach with his chin in his hands, staring at the ceiling with the focused expression of someone solving a very serious national problem. "She cried again last night," Arya said. Zion did not look away from the ceiling. "I know. I heard her. I heard her too." Arya looked down at the crayon in her hand, and then at the blank paper in front of her. "She needs 5 famous people. 5. Zion finally rolled over and sat up. His face was deeply unimpressed. "Why do people always stop at 5? 5 is not even a special number." "What's a special number?" 7. He said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world. 7 is perfect. 7 days in a week. 7 colors in a rainbow. 7 is God's number. Arya stared at him for a long moment. So we're getting 7. We're getting 7. She picked up the crayon and wrote at the top of the paper in large, uneven letters, Operation Auntie Mirabelle. Then underneath it she drew what appeared to be a gate, then an arrow, then several stick figures in what she clearly intended to be glamorous outfits. Zion crawled over and looked at it. What is that one wearing? A gown. It looks like a tent. Zion. I'm just saying. Arya tore the paper slightly, turning it toward her. The plan is we go to the estate gate and we find famous people. Zion blinked. Famous people don't just walk through estate gates, Arya. They drive through them. She looked at him with complete patience. In expensive cars. We watch for expensive cars. The silence that followed was the kind that meant Zion was genuinely considering it. That's actually smart, he said finally. Arya smiled. It was a very satisfied smile. I know. Breakfast in the Dojin household was never a quiet event. The dining room was dressed the way Renee Dojin dressed everything, with intention and quiet luxury. The long table was set with cream linen, gold-rimmed plates, and a vase of fresh white orchids at the center. Morning light poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows and caught the edges of everything, making the room feel like something out of a magazine that had not been published yet. Renee herself sat at the head of the table in a deep burgundy silk wrap dress, her natural hair pinned elegantly at the nape of her neck, gold earrings catching the light. She was beautiful in the way that powerful women are beautiful, deliberately, effortlessly, and without seeking anyone's opinion about it. Juan Dojin sat across from her in a charcoal gray fitted shirt, his reading glasses on, scrolling through something on his phone with the quiet authority of a man who had built 3 companies before 40, and was already planning the 4th. He was Korean, sharp-featured, with kind eyes that he reserved mostly for his children and his wife in that order. The twins arrived like weather. Arya walked in first wearing a little ivory dress with subtle Kent print trim along the sleeves and hem, her 2 puffs freshly done. Renee must have fixed the uneven one. Zion followed in a fitted olive green shirt and dark trousers, looking, as Juan often said, like a small version of a man who owned things. Good morning, Appa. Zion climbed into his chair with the dignity of someone who had important plans for the day. Good morning, Iama. Arya kissed Renee on the cheek and sat down. Juan lowered his phone. You two are very well behaved this morning. Zion reached for his orange juice. We're always well behaved. Renee raised one eyebrow without looking up from her tea. Zion. Most mornings, he corrected. Mirabelle came in last, dressed simply in a black wrap top and wide-leg trousers, her long hair pulled back. She looked tired in a way that good clothes could not hide. She sat down, reached for the coffee, and stared at it for a moment before drinking. Arya watched her with large, careful eyes. Zion watched her too, then looked at Arya. A silent conversation passed between them that no adult at the table could have translated, but both of them understood perfectly. Today, it said. Today, it agreed. Auntie Mirabelle, Arya said sweetly, your designs are the most beautiful in the whole world. Mirabelle looked up and smiled. It was a real smile even if it was tired. Thank you, baby. Better than all the other designers in the competition? Arya, Renee began. It's fine. Mirabelle wrapped both hands around her mug. I hope so. I really hope so. The table went quiet in the way tables go quiet when everyone is feeling something they have chosen not to say out loud. Zion stabbed a piece of fruit with his fork and said very casually, Don't worry, Auntie Mirabelle. Help is coming. Juan looked at his son over his reading glasses. What kind of help? Zion chewed thoughtfully. The best kind. By 10 o'clock, Mirabelle had locked herself back in her studio, the large sun-filled room on the east side of the house that Renee had converted for her when she moved in. 3 mannequins stood in a row by the window, each dressed in a different piece from her competition collection. The first was a floor-length gown in midnight blue silk, structured at the shoulders with subtle Kent-inspired geometric patterns hand-embroidered in gold thread along the bodice. It moved when the breeze from the window touched it, like it was already walking a red carpet somewhere in its dreams. The second was a sharp, powerful suit, deep rust-colored, double-breasted, with Ankara fabric lining the interior of the lapels. Strong, unapologetic. The kind of suit a woman wore when she had already decided she was the most important person in the room. The third was still in progress, draped in ivory and pale gold, half-formed, waiting. Mirabelle stood in front of them with her arms crossed and looked at her own work the way a mother looks at a child she is both proud of and terrified for. They were good. She knew they were good. She could feel it the way she had always been able to feel when something she made was alive versus just assembled. But good was not enough without bodies to put them on. Famous bodies. Bodies the world already turned to look at. She picked up her phone, scrolled to a name, hovered over it, put the phone down. She had called that particular publicist 3 times already. A 4th call would not change the answer. She sat on the floor beside the 3rd mannequin, pulled her knees to her chest, and let herself feel the full weight of it for exactly 60 seconds. She had learned this from her mother. You are allowed to feel it. Just do not live there. 58. 59. 60. She stood up, picked up a needle, got back to work. At the estate gate at precisely 11:14 in the morning, 2 small figures appeared. Emmanuel, the gate security guard, was a broad-shouldered man of few words and enormous patience, both of which had been tested and developed over 2 years of working for the Dojin family. He looked down at the twins standing before him, Arya in her ivory Kent-trimmed dress, Zion with his hands in his pockets looking like he was about to negotiate a business deal, and took a slow breath. Miss Arya. Master Zion. His voice was careful. Does your mother know you are here? She knows we went outside, Arya said. This was technically true. We told her we were getting some air, Zion added. This was also technically true, in the way that all truly excellent half-truths are technically true. Emmanuel looked at them for a long moment. What are you doing at the gate? Research, Zion said. Emmanuel opened his mouth, closed it, looked at Arya. We're waiting, she explained helpfully. For someone famous. Famous? Yes. Zion rocked on his heels. Famous people drive expensive cars. Expensive cars come through this gate. We are going to find 7 famous people for Auntie Mirabelle because she needs 5, but 7 is better. The security guard stared at the 2 of them for a very long time. Then he pulled his chair closer to them, sat down and folded his arms. I'll watch with you. Arya beamed. See, Zion? I told you Mr. Emmanuel was smart. Emmanuel did not smile, but the corner of his mouth did something that was close. 3 cars came through the gate in the next 40 minutes. The first was a gray SUV carrying fresh groceries for the kitchen. Zion assessed it immediately. Not famous. He did not even look up from the small notebook he had produced from somewhere and was now using to keep records, written in a combination of English and the 10 Korean words he knew best. The second was a white sedan belonging to Renee's personal assistant, a young woman named Cho who waved at the twins cheerfully as she passed. We know her, Arya said. She counts. She's not famous, Zion said. She's important. Important and famous are different things, Arya. He wrote something in the notebook. She tried to look. He tilted it away. The third car made them both stand up straight. It came slowly, long, impossibly black, moving with the quiet confidence of something that knew it did not need to hurry. A Bentley. The kind of Bentley that did not just carry people but announced them. The windows were tinted the deep, particular shade of someone who was used to being looked at and had decided, on this occasion, not to be. Arya and Zion looked at each other. The look lasted exactly 1 second. Then Zion walked directly in front of the car. Emmanuel shot to his feet. Master Zion. The Bentley stopped. Stopped because it had to. Because there was a 7-year-old boy standing in front of it in an olive green shirt with his arms slightly out at his sides, completely unbothered, like he had done this before and expected it to work. For 3 full seconds nothing moved. Then the back window came down. The woman who appeared in that window was the kind of woman who rearranged a room without trying. She was Black American, somewhere in her late 30s, dressed in a caramel-colored cashmere cord set that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Large gold hoops. Skin that looked like it had been personally negotiated with the sun. Eyes that were sharp and amused and assessing all at once. Vivian Carter looked at the boy standing in front of her car, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she was genuinely surprised. Zion walked to her window, looked at her, looked at the car, looked back at her. Ma'am. His voice was completely serious. You look expensive. That's good. Vivian stared at him. Then she turned and looked at Arya, who had appeared beside her brother and was now giving Vivian a very thorough, Professional once-over in the way that only a 7-year-old raised around fashion could manage. Are you famous? Arya asked. Vivian Carter, Grammy-nominated recording artist, 3-time award winner, fashion icon, brand ambassador for 4 international luxury houses, and the woman whose face had been on the cover of Vogue 6 times, looked at this child and said, "Little girl, what exactly is going on here?" "We're conducting a search," Zion said. "A search? For famous people." He opened his notebook. "Can I ask you some questions?" Vivian looked at Emmanuel, who was standing several feet away with the expression of a man who had accepted his life. She looked back at the twins. Something shifted in her face. The professional composure cracked, just slightly, and underneath it was something genuine. Something delighted. "Famous people don't just tell strangers they're famous," she said. "Anyone could say they're famous." Zion considered this seriously. "Okay. Are you rich?" "Zion." Arya grabbed his arm. "What? Rich is easier to check than famous. The car already told us that part." He looked at Vivian with patient, reasonable eyes. "Ma'am, we don't have a lot of time. Our auntie needs help and you look like someone who can help. Can you please just tell us if you are famous or not?" Vivian Carter looked at this child for a long moment. Then she opened her car door and stepped out. She was tall. Taller than she looked in photographs, which was something people always said about her and which she never got tired of. She stood on the driveway of the Dojan estate in her caramel cashmere and her gold hoops, and looked down at 2 of the most extraordinary children she had encountered in her entire career. "What's your name?" she asked Zion. "Zion Dojan." She looked at Arya. "And yours?" "Arya Dojan." "Dojan." She said the name slowly. "As in Juan Dojan?" "That's our Appa," Arya said proudly. Something moved across Vivian's face. Recognition. Recalibration. She looked at the estate behind the gate with new eyes. Not that the estate had not already communicated what it needed to communicate, but knowing whose it was added a particular context. She crossed her arms and looked at the twins. "Tell me about this auntie." Arya and Zion looked at each other again. Then they both started talking at the same time. They both talked at the same time for approximately 4 seconds before Zion held up one hand and looked at his sister. "Let me." Arya pressed her lips together, crossed her arms, then nodded once because even she could admit that when it came to making a case, Zion had a particular gift for it. Zion turned back to Vivian and took a small breath. When he spoke, his voice had changed. It was still 7 years old, still his, but there was something in it that was older. Something that had been listening carefully to adults his whole life and had quietly learned how they moved. "Our auntie's name is Mirabelle. She's 25. She studied at Harvard and she's the best fashion designer we've ever seen. And we've seen a lot because our mum has a good eye." He paused. "She's in a competition. A global one. The Lumiere." Vivian's eyes shifted. Barely. But Arya caught it. "You know it," Arya said. "I know it," Vivian confirmed quietly. "Then you know what it means," Zion said. "She passed phase 1 and phase 2. She's in the final 10. But for phase 3 she needs 5 celebrities to wear her designs to the gala night." He stopped. "She has 9 days. She has 0. The driveway was very quiet. A bird moved through the sky above them. The fountain inside the compound murmured distantly. Vivian Carter stood very still with her arms crossed and her eyes on this boy who was 7 years old and speaking with the precision of someone who understood exactly what was at stake. "Her parents are gone," Arya added. Her voice was softer now. Not performing softness, just feeling it. "She promised them she would be the best in the world. They believed her before they died. She needs to keep that promise." Vivian uncrossed her arms. She looked at the twins for a long time. Long enough that Emmanuel shifted his weight behind them. Long enough that Zion started to look slightly less certain, which for Zion was significant. Then Vivian Carter said, "Take me to her." The moment Mirabelle heard the knock on her studio door, she called out without looking up from the dress form, "Renee, I'm fine, I just need another hour." "It's not Mummy," Arya's voice came through the door. Mirabelle put down her needle. "Arya? Baby, what?" "We brought someone." "What do you mean you brought?" The door opened. Arya came in first, walking with the particular satisfaction of someone who had executed a plan and was allowing the results to speak. Zion followed, hands in pockets, face composed, watching his auntie's face with careful eyes. And then Vivian Carter walked through the door of Mirabelle's studio. The silence that followed was a specific kind of silence. The kind that happens when the brain sees something and simply refuses to process it immediately. Mirabelle stood by the dress form in her black wrap top and wide-leg trousers, needle in hand, and stared. Vivian looked around the studio slowly. At the 3 mannequins by the window. At the fabric swatches pinned to the board. At the sketches covering an entire wall. Detailed, expressive, alive with movement and culture, and something that could only be called vision. She walked to the midnight blue gown first, stood in front of it, reached out and touched the gold embroidery along the bodice, just lightly with 2 fingers, the way people touch things they recognize as extraordinary. The room held its breath. "You made this?" Vivian asked. Mirabelle found her voice somewhere at the back of her throat. "Yes." "How long?" "The embroidery alone took 11 days. Vivian moved to the rust-colored suit, examined the encre lining of the lapels, tilted her head slightly. Then she turned around and looked at Mirabelle fully for the first time. "How many pieces in your collection?" 7 completed. 1 still in progress. "What's the concept?" Mirabelle glanced at the twins, who were both standing by the door with identical expressions of absolute innocence, then looked back at Vivian. "The collection is called Rooted. It's about identity that doesn't have to choose. Black heritage and Korean heritage living in the same garment. The same body. Without apology." The word rooted landed in the room and stayed there. Vivian looked at the twins, then back at Mirabelle. Then she smiled. Not the public smile that appeared in photographs and on stages, but the real one, the private one, the one that people who knew her well said she gave out sparingly. "Those 2 children," she said, "stopped my car." Mirabelle closed her eyes briefly. "I am so sorry." "Don't apologize." Vivian sat down on the stool near the fabric table like she had been in this room before, like she intended to stay for a while. "Your nephew told me I looked expensive. I haven't laughed like that in months." Arya made a small sound of vindication. Zion did not move, but something around his eyes became satisfied. "I'll wear the suit," Vivian said. "To the gala." Mirabelle opened her mouth, closed it. "You'll. The rust one. With the encre lining." Vivian crossed one leg over the other. "I want the lining visible. I want people to see it when I move." "I can do that," Mirabelle said. Her voice was steady, but her hands had started to tremble slightly, and she pressed them together to still them. "I can absolutely do that." Vivian looked at her for a moment. "And I want you to finish that 3rd piece. The ivory one." She nodded toward the dress form in the corner. "What was it going to be?" "A gown. For someone who—" Mirabelle stopped, looked at the unfinished ivory and pale gold fabric. "For someone who has decided to stop shrinking." The room went very quiet again. "Finish it," Vivian said simply. "I know exactly who should wear it." What happened next moved at a speed that the Dojin household was entirely unprepared for. Vivian Carter made 3 phone calls from the cream sofa in the Dojin living room while Renee served her hibiscus tea in a gold-rimmed cup, and tried to behave as though a global superstar sitting in her house on a Tuesday morning was a completely ordinary event. Juan came home from a morning meeting, walked into the living room, stopped completely, looked at his children and said nothing for 4 seconds. Zion looked up at him from the carpet where he was drawing. "Appa, we were just being helpful." Juan sat down, accepted a cup of tea from Renee, and watched Vivian Carter work her phone like a man who had learned a long time ago that his children operated outside the boundaries of what he could have predicted. The first call produced a named Jordan Essie, a Nigerian-British supermodel who had closed the last 3 Paris shows and whose bone structure was, according to fashion editors, almost unreasonably perfect. Jordan said yes before Vivian had finished the sentence. The second call went to May Lin Park, Korean-American actress, 2-time award winner, face of the moment. She was in a meeting. The meeting ended when her assistant told her Vivian Carter was holding. She said yes. The third call was longer. Vivian walked to the window for that one, speaking in a low voice. When she came back, she sat down and looked at Mirabelle, who was perched on the edge of the sofa clutching a notepad. "That was Solange Mbeki," Vivian said. "She's South African. Designer favorite. She wants to see sketches before she commits." Mirabelle was already opening her notepad. "I have them here. She wants to see them tonight. Then she'll see them tonight." Arya, who had been sitting on the floor beside Zion pretending to color but actually listening to every single word, looked up. That's 4. 4, Zion confirmed, marking something in his notebook. We need 7, Arya reminded the room. Vivian looked at the twins. You said 5. We upgraded, Zion said. 7 is better. Vivian looked at Renee. Renee looked at Juan. Juan took a slow sip of his tea and said, They are always like this. Solange and Becky arrived that evening in a car that was somehow even quieter than Vivian's Bentley, which Arya noted and added to her notebook under a column she had titled Evidence of Fame. She was extraordinary in person, tall, dark South African, wrapped in a printed silk duster coat over wide-leg trousers, her locks pinned in an elaborate updo secured with gold thread. She looked at Mirabelle's sketches for 11 minutes without speaking. Then she said, The structure on this one. Where did this come from? Traditional Korean hanbok silhouette, Mirabelle said. But I opened the skirt and rebuilt it with Ghanaian kint geometry. The bones are Korean. The skin is West African. Solange looked at her. You understand that this is not just fashion. I know. This is a conversation. Yes. Solange set the sketches down. I'll wear the blue gown. Mirabelle wrote it down. Her handwriting was perfectly steady. Internally, she was not perfectly steady, but she had learned from her mother how to hold the outside still. The next 3 days moved like a current. Vivian worked her network with the focused energy of someone who had decided that this mattered. 2 more celebrities arrived, Kate Diallo, a Guinean French singer whose voice could silence a stadium and whose personal style was aggressive and architectural, and Yuna Bae, a Korean pop artist who had crossed over to global audiences and who walked into the Mirabelle studio, looked at the collection and said in accented English, This is the first time I have seen myself in fashion. All of myself. That was 5. The twins were tracking the count in the notebook with religious dedication. 5, Zion said on the evening of the 3rd day. We need 7, Arya said. Arya, we might have to accept. 7, she said again, and her voice had something in it that Zion recognized and did not argue with. It was the same voice she used when she prayed, quiet but absolute. That night, the twins did what they had been doing every night since this began. They knelt beside Arya's bed in their matching silk pajamas, Arya in rose gold, Zion in deep green, and they prayed. Not the performative, rushed prayers of children hurrying back to their tablets. These were slow, intentional, specific. God, Zion said quietly, we said 7. We are still saying 7. 2 more. Please. Famous ones. Auntie Mirabelle has been working so hard and she's almost there. And we think you want her to win because her designs are too good for her not to win. Arya added. And if possible, can at least one of them be very dramatic? Because this story needs energy. Zion opened one eye and looked at her. She kept her eyes closed. I'm just being specific. God, it appeared, appreciated specificity. On day 6, Vivian received a call she had not made. It came from Dominique Osei, Ghanaian-American actress, cultural force, the kind of woman whose presence at any event immediately elevated it. She had heard, through the particular invisible network that exists among powerful women, that something interesting was happening around a young designer named Mirabelle. She called Vivian directly. Is it real? Dominique asked. Come and see, Vivian said. Dominique came. She wore a stunning emerald green wrap dress with hand-beaded hem detailing, her hair in a sleek low bun, wrists stacked with gold. She walked through the studio slowly, the way people walk through galleries when they are genuinely moved and not performing it. When she reached the half-finished ivory gown, now completed, now extraordinary ivory silk with pale gold Kent-inspired beading along the entire hem and trailing sleeves that moved like water, she stopped for a very long time. Who is this for? She asked. Someone who has decided to stop shrinking, Mirabelle said. Dominique turned around. Her eyes were bright. That's me. That has always been me. 7. The morning of the gala, the Dogen house was electric. Renee was everywhere at once, coordinating, calling, managing the beautiful controlled chaos with the elegant precision that she applied to everything. Juan stood in the doorway of the studio watching his wife and his niece-in-law move through the space together, and felt something deep and quiet in his chest that he did not have immediate words for. The twins were dressed by 9 in the morning. Arya wore a miniature version of an Ankara and silk fusion dress. Deep gold with Kent print panels at the skirt, her hair pressed and falling in soft waves past her shoulders, small gold butterfly clips catching the light. She looked like something Mirabelle had designed, which was because she had. Zion wore a fitted deep navy suit with subtle Korean embroidery along the collar, a small gold pin on the lapel. He looked like his father and he knew it, and he stood differently because of it, shoulders back, chin level. Mirabelle saw them in the hallway and stopped walking. "You made us outfits," Arya said. "Of course I did." Mirabelle crouched down to their level. She was dressed already, a structured ivory and black gown, her own design, her long hair pinned and falling deliberately down one shoulder. Her eyes were bright and full and doing the thing eyes do when the body is trying to contain something too large for it. "You are the reason this is happening." Zion straightened his jacket. "We know." "Zion," Arya said. She said it first. He looked at Mirabelle. "Auntie Mirabelle, you're going to win." "You don't know that." "I know that." He said it with the same absolute quiet certainty with which he had said 7 is better. "And Mum and Dad," he stopped. His voice adjusted slightly. "Your mum and dad. They know it too." The hallway went very still. Mirabelle looked at this 7-year-old boy in his navy suit and gold pin and felt her mother's voice move through her chest like warmth. "Say it like you mean it." She stood up, straightened her gown, took a breath. "Let's go win." The Lumiere Gala was held at the Grand Obeisai Hall, a vast, luminous space that had been transformed for the evening into something that existed between a dream and a declaration. Chandeliers dripped light from ceilings that disappeared into shadow. The runway was long and white and flanked by the kind of audience that made careers simply by being present. 10 designers. 10 collections. 1 stage. When Vivian Carter walked out in the rust-colored suit, Ankara lining turned deliberately outward, catching every light in the room, the audience moved. Not politely, genuinely. A ripple of recognition ran through the crowd, the particular electric acknowledgement that happens when fashion stops being clothing and becomes language. Jordan Essie followed in a deep emerald structured cape dress from Mirabelle's collection, moving the way only she could move, like the runway was grateful for her. Maylin Park came next in a sculptural black and gold piece, precise and powerful, the kind of garment that photographed differently from every angle. Solange in the midnight blue gown, the gold embroidery catching the light with every step, the Kent geometry of the skirt moving in perfect conversation with her walk. Kate Diallo in the architectural rust and black piece, aggressive, striking, exactly right. Una Bay in something soft and structured at once, ivory and blush, the Hanbok influence unmistakable, the West African beating speaking back to it without conflict. And finally, Dominique Osei in the ivory gown, the one for someone who had decided to stop shrinking. She walked out and the room went quiet first. Then it went loud. The kind of loud that has nothing to do with politeness. The judges deliberated for 40 minutes. Mirabelle sat backstage on a white chair with her hands folded in her lap and did not move very much. Renee sat beside her, one hand over hers, saying nothing because she understood that some moments do not need words. Juan stood nearby, jacket immaculate, face composed in that particular way of his that meant he was feeling a great deal and had arranged his expression so that it would not show unless you knew where to look. The twins sat across from Mirabelle. Arya had taken off her gold butterfly clips because she had been fidgeting with them and Renee had given her a look. Zion still had his notebook open. He was not writing anything. He was just holding it. "Are you nervous?" Arya asked Mirabelle. "Yes." "Good nervous or bad nervous?" Mirabelle thought about it. "Both." Arya nodded seriously. "That means it matters." A production assistant appeared in the doorway. "Miss Mirabelle? They're ready." She won. Not narrowly. Not by the polite margin of competition results that leave everyone feeling diplomatic. She won decisively, the judges citing not just technical mastery but cultural depth, originality of concept, and what the lead judge called a collection that does not ask for permission to exist. When her name was announced, the sound in the room was enormous. Mirabelle stood at the front of the stage and held the award and felt the weight of it, the physical weight in her hands and the other weight, the one that had no measurable unit, the one made of every late night and every rejection and every prayer and every promise made to parents who were no longer there to see this moment but who she felt, with complete and uncomplicated certainty, were watching. "Say it like you mean it." She had meant it, what nobody in the audience had been told. What had been arranged quietly by Vivian Carter and approved with a single nod from Juan Dojin, was that the final walk of the evening would not be made by a celebrity. The music changed. Two small figures appeared at the top of the runway. Arya Dojin walked first in her gold and Kent fusion dress, her hair soft around her face, her gold butterfly clips back in place, walking with the particular unhurried confidence of a child who had decided she was magnificent and saw no reason to reconsider that decision. Zion followed, navy suit, gold pin, hands easy at his sides, looking straight ahead the way his father had taught him. Not at the crowd at the end of the runway. Always at the end of the runway. The room watched them. And then it did something that rooms full of powerful, composed, professionally unimpressed people rarely do. It melted. The applause that broke out was different from all the applause before it. It was warmer. More personal. The kind that comes from somewhere below the chest. Cameras moved toward them. Phones rose. The two children who had stopped a Bentley with nothing but boldness and love walked the Lumiere runway in designs made by their auntie and looked, both of them, completely unsurprised by any of it. Backstage, Renee pressed her fingers to her mouth. Juan looked at the ceiling for a moment and then looked back. Mirabelle watched her babies walk and felt everything her mother had ever told her rise up inside her at once. All the belief, all the prayers, all the say it like you mean it. And she pressed a fist to her heart and held it there. Afterwards, in the golden noise of the reception, Vivian found Mirabelle standing near the window holding a glass of water and staring out at the city lights with an expression that was somewhere between triumph and something quieter, something more private. How does it feel? Vivian asked. Mirabelle was quiet for a moment. Like it just started. Vivian looked at her. It did. They stood together for a while in companionable silence, the kind that forms quickly between women who have recognized something in each other. Then Vivian said carefully, as if she was choosing the moment, "There's something I need to tell you. About the competition." Mirabelle turned to look at her. The Lumiere isn't just a competition. Vivian's voice had shifted. Still warm but carrying something underneath it now, something deliberate. There's a second stage that most winners don't find out about until after the announcement. Private commission. Global. The kind that would take you from winning a competition. She paused. To changing an industry. Mirabelle held very still. What kind of commission? The kind, Vivian said slowly, that someone else has already tried to make sure you never find out about. The city lights glittered through the window. Mirabelle's fingers tightened around the glass. Who? She said. Vivian looked at her for a long moment. And then from across the reception room, Arya's voice cut through the noise. Auntie Mirabelle. Both women turned. Arya was standing very still near the entrance, which was unusual for Arya who was rarely still. Zion was beside her and his face, the face of a boy who had been calm through everything, who had walked a runway without flinching, had changed. He was looking at something near the door. Someone near the door. Someone who was watching Mirabelle with an expression that had nothing warm in it. Mirabelle looked across the room. The person by the door looked back. And in the moment before the noise of the reception swallowed everything again, Mirabelle felt something cold move through her chest that had nothing to do with the night air. She had seen that face before. She just could not remember where. Yet, you just watched two little twins secretly recruited 7 celebrities for their auntie, stop a Bentley, pray for 7 celebrities, and walk a global runway, and that was only the beginning. Subscribe to Black Silk Stories so you don't miss what comes next. Drop a comment and tell us, who is the person by the door? Black Silk Stories, where every thread has a story, and every story hits different.